Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down. Oh, I'm so excited for this review because it gets to be spoiler-filled. I've gone and seen this movie now twice, and I tell you, it's even better the second time around because you can look for things you would have never looked for in the first one, and then when you find those little treasures, oh my gosh, it's so rewarding because the people who make these movies are just so good. Oh, why don't you pull up a chair, man? Take a seat. We're getting ready to dive into spoiler-filled into Spider-Man Far From Home. That's right. If you have not seen Spider-Man Far From Home, I recommend that you go check out my non-spoiler review, where I talk about the movie, all the great things that they accomplish without somehow managing to spoil anything about the movie. Go check that out first, and then come back after you've seen the movie and check out the spoiler review, because you don't want to spoil this one for yourself. It's so rewarding and so enjoyable to watch things unfold in this movie the way they do. That much like Endgame or Infinity War, if you find stuff out about that, it doesn't hurt the movie, but it does certainly not, surprise you and give you the shock and awe and wow and wonder that this movie is able to deliver. So go see the movie, check out the non-spoiler review, then come on back. All right, everybody gone? Cool, it's just us that have seen this absolutely amazing Spider-Man film. We're going to start spoiling this bad boy in 3, and 2, and 1. Mysterio's the villain. Yeah, I know, it's not a shocker. I mean, if you've grown up, and pun, not the shocker himself, but it's not a shock to anyone, that Mysterio is the villain here, because if you've read the Spider-Man comics, if you've watched the Spider-Man cartoons, you know that he's the master of illusion. I said it way back when we started watching these trailers and we were seeing him fight the elementals, which, what a credit to the filmmaking, that first act and the stuff with the elementals. It makes you question, for maybe just a split second, that maybe this is a Quentin Beck from a different reality, from a different universe. Maybe the multiverse actually does exist. And maybe he's not the bad guy. They make you believe it. That's how good that first act is. But of course, like I said back then when we were seeing them, I was like, those are probably some sort of an illusion or hologram or something of that sort that he can trick Spider-Man. And sure enough, he does. So we're going to start this spoiler review with the man himself, Mr. Jake Gyllenhaal, the guy I could barely say anything about because of all the massive spoilers behind his character and the way Mysterio really functions. When we get to find out that he's actually Mysterio and we get to see on the inside of what's going on, oh my gosh, you want to talk about maybe the most comic accurately adapted villain in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. We might be looking at him. I'm going to do a separate video. You'll see as we go through, I might mention this is a comic reference or a cartoon reference. I'll make a separate video with how many references, specifically from the 1963 original run of Mysterio in the comics, are just pulled right off the pages and adapted in ways here where when you see things, you go, oh man, that's from the comic. Oh man, that's sort of what I saw in the comic or on the cartoon. There are so many wonderful moments. It's wild. And it's when you're sitting there and you're watching it, you go, oh man, this feels like it's so comic accurate. I feel like I've seen these things. Then you go back and you start reading the comics again. This was what I did. I came back and I've ripped through the first 10 appearances of Mysterio in Spider-Man. And you're just like, oh my gosh, man. The wealth of material and how they adapt it and use it is just marvelous. So we got to start with Mr. Gyllenhaal, who just so good. It's one thing to say he's so good in this movie. It's another to really tell you why he's so good in this movie. It's because he has a full-on split performance here. It's not two different characters, but he presents himself in two very different ways. And like I said, that first act, when he's fighting the elementals, when he's working with Spider-Man and Nick Fury and Maria Hill, you get this sense that he really is a good guy. You start to maybe wonder, is this story of him coming from a different Earth that was destroyed by the elementals now to this Earth that, after all of the energy surges from the snaps, ripped holes, they came to our Earth and he's chased them down to try to revenge his family and his planet, which was destroyed. The technology, the tech is working on Maria and Nick, and you're really seeing him do heroic things, and you're seeing stuff like Spider-Man, in Venice actually get soaked with water and get hit with things, and you're like, well, maybe it's real. You get that molten lava fire monster What a marvelous scene. They do great stuff with Spidey in that sequence, and Mysterio. And just when you think you've seen everything with Mysterio, when he's shooting the lasers and the smoke and the way he defeats the water, charges up even more to defeat the molten lava monster, and you're like, oh my gosh, like maybe this is the whole time, that first time I'm watching it, the first act I didn't enjoy it as much as the second time because I was waiting for that shoe to drop and I was trying to figure out how, because it's like, well, all right, if it's an illusion, how is Spidey like stopping that bell tower from falling, and how is he swinging and attaching to things that clearly are part of the illusion, if it's an illusion, that you really start to question it. Now, deep down, I trusted my gut, and after they defeat the fire monster, they start to have, Quentin's like, come on, kid, let's go to the bar. You get a lovely moment. There are so many innocent moments with Peter, and it's one of the reasons that Tom Holland, I think, is the best at being, both Peter and Spider-Man. But he's like, I'm not 21, and you're in Europe, you don't have to be 18, but he's 16, so still wouldn't be able to. But there's so many great, we'll talk about some of them later, just moments within the cast and this group that feels so high school, feels so authentic, that it really makes you believe that they are as young as they're trying to portray themselves as. But anyway, so he's like, I'm not 21. He's like, hey, come on. So he's drinking lemonades, and they're just sitting, and Quentin's like, look, I get it, man, like you got trapped, Fury trapped you, essentially. They kept figuring out ways to pull you into this. What do you want to do? Like, they have this real moment where they seem like friends, and it's one of those where you see like Holland and Gyllenhaal being friendly outside, and a lot of the lead up on Twitter and Instagram, and that stuff. Clearly, there must be a real bond there, because the friendly stuff, you really believe that Quentin cares about Peter, wants to be Peter's friend, kind of being a mentor to Peter, that when you're in the middle of this bar scene, that's when you're really starting to question, like, maybe this is something different. And then the E.D.I.T.H glasses show up, and we'll talk about that later, but apparently, Tony Stark leaves these glasses to Peter Parker with a note, like, for the next Iron Man, I trust you. And it gives him the ability to access Tony's entire defense system, which includes, drones and satellites and everything. And Peter, has a moment where he accidentally almost kills one of his schoolmates. The only way to stop it is like tell everybody, like, hey, look over here at like the goats, and everyone looks, and he jumps up through the roof of a bus and stops this drone. And you're like, oh, it's so beautiful. There's so many wonderful, beautiful shots in this movie, and the action. Oh my gosh, like I get sidetracked. But you kind of have this moment where he uses them. So already, like he was trying to get E.D.I.T.H to help him delete a photo and almost kills a classmate. And he knows that Tony knows all the mistakes he made, including what he did in Far From Home, and how Tony was really like a dad to him, and the way he would talk to him and be like, you can't just you can't be a kid if you have this power. So maybe the glasses weren't meant for me. And he tries them on first, and Quentin's like, maybe they make like contact lens versions. The humor and just everything, it's so buddy-like. And Peter immediately says, why don't you try them on, man? And he puts them on. He's like, that's it. Tony trusted me to give these glasses to the next Iron Man, and that's you, man. Like you got you come from another place. You've already saved the world once. Like it's you. And the minute he hands those glasses to Peter, like, okay, here it comes. That shoe is finally dropping. And right before he does, you get this kind of dead stare face from Gyllenhaal, almost where he zones out, but it looks sinister. And you're like, and then once Pete leaves, the smile creeps across. Actually, once he hands him the glasses, the smile creeps across his face. You're like, he's definitely bad. Pete leaves, and it gets even broad, and he's just like, we did it! And you're like, we did it. And all of a sudden, everything in the bar disappears. Like this blue hologram illusions start to shutting down. Never in a million years did, like when I said in my non-spoiler, like there are scenes that lull you into these scenes. I never expected the bar to be an illusion. Like just bring him to a bar and have all the things in place. No, it's an illusion. You find out that not only is Quentin Beck after these E.D.I.T.H classes, Quentin Beck, along with a whole slew of other people, are actually employees of Tony Stark. He gets up to do a toast. He's like, to our boss, Tony Stark. And it's one of these situations where you find out that all these employees that work for Stark, created things that he just never really gave them any credit for, including, you find out that Quentin Beck developed the BARF technology from Civil War, and we get a flashback to Civil War. We see Stark on the stage at MIT, where he's showing the hologram of, like, saying goodbye to his parents. And he calls it BARF, and you spin it around, and the camera spins, and there's Gyllenhaal going, BARF? In the background. And then they do it again when he toasts the next person. He goes to Bill. And they bring back, of all people, Peter Billingsley, who played William Ginter Riva in the first Iron Man movie, the guy who couldn't build the arc reactor for Obadiah Stane. And they flash back, and it's the same guy. It's not like a different person, different. It's the same guy. They brought him back, and boom, insert him in as one of the people that's helping Quentin do everything. And you start to learn that all these different people had different things. And there was a woman who figured out that Stark was going to give E.D.I.T.H to a kid, and figured out that it was Peter Parker. That's how Mysterio was able to identify him. You're just sitting there, and you're watching this, and you're like, wow. Like, wow, man. And, like, it's mind-blowing. And then you start to see, like, you get behind-the-scenes moments with Mysterio where he's building the illusions, and you're seeing how he's building them, how he uses the drones to create actual damage. And that's one of the things, like, when you go back and watch the Elemental fights, knowing that he's using these drones, okay, oh, you see how he makes the water movie, see how he makes blasts. You understand that he can use these sonic blasts to punch Peter and spray water at Peter and make everything seem believable while also creating this holographic illusion. Which, in and of itself, is a nod, obviously, to the comics and also the cartoon series. The 94 animated series, the first time Mysterio shows up, Peter figures out that something's wrong because he figures out that it's hologram tech. And you're like, oh my god, there's so many. Like I said, we're going to do a separate video. Just all the different tie-ins and things that pull into this movie and the places that they pull from. You're just like, one, the adaptation is amazing. But like, two, when you're hiding like the barf technology and all that stuff, you're like, how far ahead was Kevin Feige and co thinking about this stuff? Or was it like, oh man, this might make sense maybe one day if we get our hands on this, and then boom, you can execute on it. I mean, that reveal is one of the best reveals I've seen in an MCU movie. So much so that we've been chatting about it so long, we're not even in the second 2/3 of this movie where they literally didn't show us anything. Like, you watch these Far From Home trailers, and yes, we see a couple things from Spider-Man, but zero with Mysterio from what we get in the second half of this film. And, you know, like I said, getting to watch him build these illusions, it lets you go back, and when you watch it the second time, see like, oh man, water hit this thing, and when it moves past that thing, it's dry, because it wasn't actually water. They only had a few drones in the first, you know, fight with the water elemental. That, like, there are things in the background that don't get wet. The first time Peter looks like he gets hit by water, comes up dry. All these little things, and you're just like, wow. And then we get into the stuff that, like, everyone was hoping, and that's throwing Spidey right into the middle of these illusions. And it's part of that, like I said, dual performance where Gyllenhaal really cares about Peter to the point where when he knows he has to go try to kill him, that he puts it on Bill. He's like, Bill, Peter's blood. The worst thing right now for me is I'm going to have to go kill Peter Parker. And if that happens, blood's on your hands, Bill, because Bill didn't mention the fact that, you know, one of these holographic things got pulled off when Peter, of one of the drones when Peter was fighting the fire monster, and didn't care to mention it. And then that, of course, leads to Spider-Man starting to figure it out. And how yet Mysterio's still able to trap him, it's just mind-blowingly marvelous. And the fact that he really cares about Peter it makes all that stuff in the first act feel so real. And then that switch to the sinister that Gyllenhaal does is just so good. And he's so sneaky and so clever, and he just embodies all those things in the movie. And then you get into the first real big illusion that Spider-Man is aware is an illusion, but doesn't know how to fight it. It's unbelievable. After he figures this out, where, you know, he finds out that there was holographic technology being used, he goes and tries to talk to Fury, and meets him in Berlin. And they go to like the Europa, it's something like Europa office, and they go kind of in there, and there's, you know, Fury's like, you know, like, who else did you tell? I need to know who else you told. And Spidey's like, what? And then all of a sudden, the other thing I love about this movie, the spider sense starts to really develop and become a thing, and he immediately senses Beck. He's like, Beck is here. And then the building, same thing, disappears. And you're like, the second scene that you get lulled into, never in a million years are you thinking that that is an illusion. You're just like, yeah, this makes sense into what Peter is doing, and like, he would go tell Fury, and this is where Fury's taking him, and you know that that's not an illusion, or do you? And then when everything else drops away, because you're not thinking about it, you're like, oh my gosh, now we're in the middle of another... They're in a cruddy, like, warehouse building that's unfinished and destroyed, and they shoot Fury, and they shoot Spider-Man, and Spider-Man kind of falls down to, like, the first floor. And then Mysterio starts talking in, like, this booming voice, and everything around Pete starts to change. And we get to see all of these unbelievable illusions, man, fooling him and just so many different things where he's got things coming at Pete where he goes to punch him and misses. He smacks into a wall, which is a comic reference. At one point he's like, I know this is all fake, and Mysterio's like, is it really? And he grabs MJ and drops her off a building, and Pete goes and dives for it and crashes headfirst into the floor within 2-3 feet because it's all an illusion. And then you see maybe one of the most messed up parts of the illusion, man. Like, he kind of sends him where he's moving him around, and then he just drops him smack dab in front of this grave. And basically tries to hang Tony Stark's death on Spider-Man. Like, everything that's weighing on him at that moment, you're like, oh, that's dark. And then we get something I don't think anybody in a million years saw, man. Like, a hand comes up out of the ground, and this decrepit skeleton like dead version of Iron Man crawls out of the ground. You get the shot of the mask, and the mask is broken, and you can see a skull underneath, and I'm like, oh my god, they just did Zombie Avengers. Never in a million years would I think that we would get zombies of any of the Avengers in the movies, and then in the middle of this illusion you see Iron Man as a zombie, and I'm just like, wow. This team of creative people are just using everything at their fingertips with Mysterio to just create these iconic images and things that I don't think people ever thought we would see in the movies. And then the way that Beck is able to just use the stuff around him, where he gets Spider-Man to like try to flip out of something, and when he almost pulls a crane on top of himself. And you're watching all this stuff happen, the mixture of the CGI and animation with the real world stuff, and it is one of the most spectacular things I've ever seen in a movie. It is marvelous to watch, and it just keeps coming faster and faster. He starts moving the room around like this, and Pete is literally like, whoa, they're so... Another thing from the comics where the illusions are so real that sometimes Spider-Man thinks that they might be real, or that he's not sure what's real or isn't, or is this actually happening, where he'll think he's hit something or jumped off something that's not really there. And in the comics, the mist can kind of block his spidey senses. Here, his spidey senses haven't been functioning properly, and as they start to develop, it enhances the way he's able to finally attack Mysterio, which I think, again, is another nice nod to the comics, where, like, one of the first times we ever saw Peter lose his powers, and this is in a Mysterio comic. So you get stuff like that. And then, like, ultimately, after he kind of knocks them around, he throws a ton of Spider-Man at him. He throws a bunch of mirrors. Another thing out of the comics and also the animated series, where we've seen him use mirrors to try to mess with Pete. Only here, they all come out and start fighting Pete. And it's one of those things that you're watching, you're like, this is an illusion. And when they kind of come on top of Pete, they jump on him, he kind of just crumples down because of the sheer fear, and then can pop right up because they're not actually there. And like I said, you watch these illusions the second time, and you're like, they mesh so well, and it's so physically accurate. He makes Pete change his suit a bunch of times when he references, like, early on Peter Parker in his original suit. He takes the stealth suit and puts on the suit from the first Spider-Man that he gets from Tony, and all these different things, man. To the point that when eventually he forces him outside, Beck gets shot and dies. And again, there's another thing that Beck is known for doing in the comics, is faking his own death. And boom, fakes it right in front of Peter. And, here comes Nick Fury all messed up. And he's like, okay, we need to know who else you told. And the minute he says MJ, Ned, and Ned may have told Betty, he goes, you're so gullible. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's still an illusion. Boom. Then Fury disappears, and there's Beck standing in his illusion tech suit, which is kind of like one of these like 3D, one of these like motion capture suits that we've seen before. And then he has a fishbowl helmet that has all the tech and things that, like, if you were inside Tony's helmet, you'd see. Only it's just a clear fishbowl type top. Brilliant way to incorporate that into the real thing. And he kind of keeps throwing other things at Spider-Man as he, like, it's crazy. He can allow Spider-Man to see him, but then also throw illusions at him that backs him into getting hit by a train, which is like a sneaky deep cut reference, I think, to the 1994 animated series, where the first time Mysterio comes around, one of the illusions that he uses is a bullet train that looks exactly like the bullet train in this movie. Only when it hits Peter, it disappears. So to see him get hit by a train that was a hologram in the cartoon, is a real train here. I was like, oh man, like just visually that, all these things, they're so smart. They give us all these little tiny things. I'll tell you, it's so worth going back and rereading like the first run of Mysterio and going back and rewatching the cartoons. You'll pick up on so many little things that are sprinkled all over the place. So like that illusion is amazing. But then even the second one where he fights him on the Tower Bridge, and I think that also a nod. The first time that Spider-Man and Mysterio fight is on a bridge in New York City. So to have the final battle here be on a bridge, I was like, that's really fitting. And even in that sequence, man, like we finally get the multiple Mysterios, which we saw in the comics. Where it's like, how do you know which one is which? And that leads me to my favorite deep cut comic moment in the movie, where Pete closes his eyes. In the comics, he webs his eyes closed so that he can't see anything and just trusts his spidey sense. Here, it's his Peter Tingle. And he's like, come on, Peter Tingle, don't fail me. And he takes down these drones to break down the illusion. But seeing the multiple Mysterios was just so awesome. And just that whole fight with Mysterio and the way that it builds and leads, and the way, like I said, he closes his eyes and can break through the illusion, which ultimately the big illusion is this massive fire, earth, wind, and water monster that, an Avengers a level threat that, Quentin Beck references, which I love too. Like, quick side note, I love how he ties into the Avengers. And when you get to the like animated credits, you see like there are things from his notes that are like circling, like Thor gear and like other things that help obviously influence the way he uses his, powers that look kind of like Doctor Strange or Thor or Iron Man, the way he flies around. So I love that stuff is all in there, and it's the perfect Avengers level threat for him to take on. And then the way Peter gets inside of it, he has Happy fly him up first, and then he dives in, and he gets on the inside, and it's like black. It kind of gave me very, very similar imagery from one of those comics where like you just got these really contrasts of like black backgrounds and things with the webs, and he's going through webbing all of these different drones inside this thing that's kind of black, and it looks tiled because they're creating the imagery. And he even says in the movie, he's like, wow, man, this is amazing. And you watch him sync all these things up to start breaking down the illusion. Beck is so well versed to take on Spider-Man. He's using the drones, he's using E.D.I.T.H to constantly keep Spider-Man away, where he's getting beat big. He's got to focus on these drones before he can even get to Quentin. And the drones, there's so many of them, and it's crazy. Like, he gets set on fire at one point, and all this stuff, and then it's just so beautiful because it leads to another deep cut MCU tie where he figures out that he can get to Beck if he comes under the Tower Bridge. So from the part of the bridge where you're driving, one of the drones is malfunctioning and sending the sonic blasts that are kind of launching stuff into the air. So when he throws a toy and he sees where it bounces up, and he grabs a sign that says Tower Bridge, and then a thing that he MacGyvers an explosive. And it's so Captain America-esque the way he's holding the shield that it's so fitting that after he throws the bomb, he then runs to the pulsar and jumps and actually does like the Winter Soldier launch that Scarlet Witch does with Cap, which is so cool. And he has the shield so that he can use that to catapult himself up under through the glass and get into the room to take on Quentin. And that's where he closes his eyes, knocks out all the drones, and then once again, Quentin Beck fakes his death. The drone shoots Quentin, and Quentin goes down. And while he's dying, Spider-Man's talking to him. And then just like out of nowhere, you just see Spider-Man go like this, and you hear a gunshot. Another kind of like deep cut comic thing too. There was a bit when using the holograms was projecting images of like the Rogues Gallery to Spider-Man. And he can't see that Quentin's right next to him because he thinks he's part of the wall. And in the comic, he gets knocked out. Here, same thing. Quentin casting imagery of himself dying on the floor to distract Spider-Man to try to get him from this side. But in the movie, boom, Spidey stops him, takes on the real Quentin, who then drops and actually dies there as well. And you're like, I can't believe they just killed Quentin Beck. Like, this is immediately one of the best villains that they've ever done. And like I said, from the visuals and the way they use the illusions and just the adaptation of Mysterio, so spot on accurate. You're like, how can you kill Mysterio? I don't think they did. Like I said, he's faked his death twice up to this point in the movie. And the comics, he's faked his death multiple times. And the thing I've picked up the most is a lot of the cuts to Mysterio coming from the 1963 run. And after his second appearance, Quentin is dead. Mysterio comes back and Spider-Man thinks he's seeing Mysterio, and everyone tells him he died in prison. You find out that Beck died in prison, and then somebody else was actually assuming the mantle of Mysterio. In reality, later on, it gets revealed that Quentin used that to get out of prison. He faked his death and has been impersonating a doctor known as Ludwig Reinhardt. I'm telling you right now, if Ludwig Reinhardt shows up anywhere in the MCU, specifically with Aunt May, who he kind of cared for in this one illusion in the comics, he's still alive. I swear to you. And when we get to the end stuff of this movie, I'm going to tell you even more why I think that he's alive. But that being said, even if we just take it at face value that Mysterio died, the most perfect adaptation I've seen of any of the villains, any of the characters maybe. He's right up there with one of the best adaptations from the comics. And I think this is maybe the best version of Mysterio we've ever seen. It utilizes him at all his best moments. Tricking the audience, tricking Spider-Man, just being able to reference things from the comics and the cartoon and present imagery that's so accurate to what this character is, and then to adapt that into a world like now, where a special effects artist would make a ton of sense. Well, let's not have him be a special effects artist. He can sort of be a special effects artist working for Tony Stark, developing this technology. So he's a Tony Stark level, intelligence, that when he gets his hands on technology, he's able to create this imagery that, even the comics back then couldn't really represent correctly. And it's visually, like I said, the most mind-blowing stuff I've ever seen in the MCU. I mean, when the illusions start to break apart or materialize, and the way it messes with Spidey and his senses, and how it's so perfectly done. Even if we just take it at his face value that Quentin Beck has died, it's still it's marvelous. But it feels kind of like Killmonger, which I've heard there are rumors that he might come back. And I really don't think that Quentin's dead. And we'll explain that more when we get to the end credit stuff. But now, we spent almost a half hour talking about Mysterio, who Jake Gyllenhaal, but just, like I said, the way he's able to play the lovable guy and the sinister guy so well, and the way that he literally always cares about Peter. He didn't want to do any of the things that he does. It makes his character complex and have a lot of depth, and just so much credit to him. There's a lot of other stuff going on in this movie, and like I said, Tom Holland is just mind-blowing in all of this. And what I really love is that it's a Peter story as much as it is a Spider-Man story. And I said that in my non-spoiler. And, the action is amazing, right? Getting to see him, have that Captain America moment, or, get set on fire and then, put the fire out in the water, and then his suit is, still kind of melted after he gets hit by the train, and how he reacts to that. There's just so much good stuff with Peter, but at the core of it, where he's I want to be a kid first, like Mr. Stark. I don't want to be an Avenger yet. And after everything with Endgame and losing Tony, and let alone having to deal with the fact that Tony is everywhere, man. Everywhere they go in this film, there's imagery of Tony or Iron Man, because Tony Stark saved the world, and specifically in New York. He saved New York twice, with the nuke stop, and everybody knows who he is, and he's everywhere. So having to deal with all that was just so good, I thought, for Peter, that when you get these innocent moments that are high school, wanting to go on this trip and wanting to get the girl, and the plan he has to take MJ to the Eiffel Tower and give her a Black Dahlia necklace because she loves murder and death, and Black Dahlia death murders is one of her favorites. There's this glass place. All these wonderfully romantic things. You just love Peter so much. And you feel for him the whole movie. And the thing that I think is the best is his chemistry with everybody that he has on screen, and the way his story interacts with everybody. Right from the get-go, we have that real awkward encounter we've seen in the trailers with Aunt May and Happy. The whole storyline with Happy and Aunt May is wonderful. Peter's kind of something's weird about, you just complimented, and then he complimented. What just happened? To then, he's on the phone at one point with Happy, or with his aunt, after he gets there, after the Venice attacks, and he's no, I'm fine. And she hears him say, Happy, that's my lunch, don't eat that. He's wait, Happy's there? Yeah, he's down here volunteering, and he just, the slow build to the point that we get to a moment where, like I said, one of the core concepts of the movie is the fact that Peter is gonna have to pick up the mantle of Iron Man, right? Like Tony gave him Edith, passed the torch, so to say, directly to Spider-Man. And everybody assuming that Spider-Man is going to be the next leader. You have all these vibes of Tony that we get to a scene at the end where you see what seems like Spider-Man rehearsing a speech to say, I'm Peter Parker, I'm Spider-Man. And right when he's getting to the moment where you think he's going to go, I'm Spider-Man, which would be such a wonderful nod to the way Downey said, I'm Iron Man to the world, he goes, are you two dating? And he's talking to Happy and Aunt May. And it hurt me a little bit when Aunt May was like, no, it was a summer fling. And Happy was like, yeah. And then both of them are just like, well, I mean, whatever, it's going to go, like type of thing. It's so cute. I hope that it works out for Happy because I really loved watching them and interacting on screen. He's so funny, but like obviously Marissa Tomei and Tom Holland have great chemistry. I love seeing him at the charity fundraiser at the beginning and where they're kind of slapping hands and he's, just openly Spider-Man to Aunt May. It's one of those things that in this adaptation where, people know who Spider-Man is, it actually enhances the character because it gives him more places to kind of come off and go, like, I need to talk to somebody about this stuff. So I love his interactions with Aunt May, but like I had said in my non-spoiler, very, very small. Maybe my favorite person he is with in this whole movie is Happy Hogan. Jon Favreau and Tom Holland are great in this movie. And I referenced that after he gets hit by the train, who does he call? Well, first, he ends up in the Netherlands, which is a wonderfully hysterical scene. He's in prison with what look like soccer hooligans, but everybody in the Netherlands can speak English and is super, super friendly. To where he gets out of prison, and then the guys lock themselves back in. And then he goes out and has somebody give him a phone. He's like, yeah, here, borrow my phone. And he calls Happy. And what's great is Homecoming, Happy wouldn't answer or didn't want to answer. And here, as soon as Pete calls, Happy's like, tell me where you are, I'll come get you. And you get this beautiful scene in this field of pink and yellow and red and blue tulips where they touch down there and you just see, and it's so great because the reason I love Mysterio is how he can mess with Pete's head. And when Pete sees Happy, he's like, Happy, he's like, wait. Are you you? Are you really you? He's like, tell me something that only you would know. And he's like, okay, well, remember... and he gives him this moment, this memory, and as soon as something super embarrassing about Pete, I would think it was when he was in Germany, he ordered videos, and Happy figured out that they were pornographic videos at the front desk, and Pete's like, yeah, okay, it's you, and he gives him this massive hug, and you're just like, oh. And then you get maybe my favorite Peter scene in the whole movie where he's on the plane, and, he just has this real moment with Happy where he's like, I miss him. Everywhere I look, Tony is everywhere, and I don't know how to do this. Everyone's looking to the next, Tony Stark, the next Iron Man. And it's I don't think I can be that. I'm still a kid. And Happy's like, you can't. Nobody can, live up to Tony. Tony couldn't live up to Tony. He's like, he's my best friend. He was a mess. He second guessed everything he ever did. But the only thing he never second guessed was picking you. And you just get this now. I mean, even now I'm getting chills and teary-eyed, and you're just the emotional impact moments in these movies, man, they hit so well. And here you're feeling everything. You're really feeling the torch is actually being passed. And he goes, so what are we gonna do? And Pete's like, I don't know. We'll go kick his ass. And he's like, no, literally right now we're just hovering over the Netherlands. Where are we going? And he gets into Happy's phone, and it's funny that the head of security's password is password. Gets in, finds a flash video, and figures out they're in London. So they fly, and when they're flying, he goes, okay, I'm gonna need a suit. And Happy just kind of smiles, like, I got you. He hits a button, and the back of the plane opens up like it would for Tony. Only instead, this creates a room for Spider-Man to build the black and red suit. So that was one of the things I said in the non-spoiler. Images of the black and red are kind of similar to Miles, and they've pulled a lot of things from Miles, Ned is not the Ned Leeds we know from the comics. He actually feels more like Ganka Lee, who is Miles Morales' best friend, and just kind of using that body, but leaving it the Ned character from the comics, to kind of give Peter a best friend. And it was smart. I think it enhances the story to give Pete that element. But then, you kind of concede that one. Then Spider-Verse comes out and Miles is massive. And then you get this thing where he's got the black gloves and the red fingertips. And you're like, that's right from Miles. And Pete says this thing, he's like, pull up everything you have on Spider-Man. And they obviously only show his suits, but the concept of pull up everything on Spider-Man, I'm going to build something myself, now feels more like a really nice nod. Peter really liked this element, so he put this in there. It feels more like a tribute to Miles than stealing more property from him. So, and it's awesome to watch Pete build a suit, man. It uses like holograms, much like Tony. So at one point he puts his hand like into the web shooter and is moving it around, and they shoot over to Happy, and he's just smiling. And Pete looks back and he's smiling. You're like, oh my god, this feels like young Tony Stark. And that's the other thing they do great in this movie with Pete, is they really let him showcase his intelligence and how smart he is in building all of this stuff, feeling more like a young Tony Stark. I feel like they haven't hit that as well in these movies until this moment, and you're just like, yes. And Happy's like, all right, man, you take care of the suit, I'll take care of the music. And he throws on the AC/DC track from Avengers, and you're like, oh my god, that's amazing. And then Pete goes, oh man, I love Led Zeppelin. And you're just like, it's so spot on, because like even late in the movie at one point, Fury says something, and he's like, Tony said you wouldn't get that because it's not a Star Wars reference. So to reference something else from back in the 80s, and Pete get it wrong, I thought was really funny. But again, another wonderful kind of like ode. And like I said, that relationship's one of my favorite. Obviously, Ned and Pete is great, but it's different. Ned really is just constantly killing Pete. Like, he's supposed to help him get to sit next to MJ on the plane to Venice, and instead like ends up getting himself sat next to Betty, and Pete next to the teacher, and MJ next to the new high school crush, which is one of the things I love in this movie. She ends up sitting next to Brad Davis, who was 5 years younger than them and now is their age, and it's like the heartthrob of their group. And he's like, I didn't even know Brad was coming. So he kind of hurts Pete there. There's an element about Ned we'll talk about momentarily that constantly just makes Ned be like, I'm sorry if like this feels like it's getting in the way of this. But that being said, I love him and Holland. I mean, they do the handshake a bunch of times, and that friendship is rock solid. But the big relationship that emerges in this movie is the one he has with MJ, and him and Zendaya. Wow, man, because they're so like timid about it, and the way they approach each other throughout the whole movie, it's like they're never really saying what they really mean. And Pete always kind of locks up around her, and he gets to the point where he's just like, I've messed up, I've bailed on MJ like a bunch of times. Now we're having to get to go home because all these monsters keep popping up. Come out with me. And they go out, and he's going to like give her the Black Dahlia necklace and execute his plan. And MJ's like, you're Spider-Man. And he's like, no, that's not what wait, what? I'm Spider? No, I'm not Spider-Man. And she's like, yeah, like, you're Spider-Man. She's like, why do you think I've been, and he's like, so you've only been following me and like paying attention to me because I'm Spider-Man? And she's like, yeah. And like Pete's like, oh, okay. And then that's where we reveal that the holograms are happening. The thing that he pulls off in that fight, she finds and gives it to him. So when the hologram goes off, he goes, okay, yeah, I am Spider-Man. I messed up really, really bad. Like, we have to go fix this. I just love all that, right? Like, it's this original version of MJ, who's not Mary Jane, has so many different elements and qualities that Mary Jane had. So like, I love all that. And then like at the end of the movie, when Pete is finally saving the day as Spider-Man, she shows up right at the end, and is like, look, I don't do well like getting attached to people. That's why I said I was only interested in Spider-Man, but like, I really like you. And then they had this cute little like fast kiss, and then like a very sweet, like, you know, like a high school first time kiss, and it's just a wonderful moment. And just everything about the two of them is great. And I think it allows a lot of potential for Zendaya and MJ in the universe itself. So I love, obviously, Tom Holland. But the other thing I love in this movie, which I mentioned, involves Ned and Betty. And I think it's so genius that when Ned gets sat next to Betty on the plane, off the plane, he's talking to Pete, and he had been like, you can't go after, you know, MJ, like, we're gonna be bachelors in Europe. And, you know, Pete says something, and then like Betty comes by and says, hey babe, and he's like, hey babe. And hey babe is movie so much, they call each other babe all the time. Again, so high school feeling that on the flight they became boyfriend girlfriend, and Ned now like is all grown up, again, which is a very high school type of thing. Like, it's very believable that a pair of 16-year-olds on a flight would end up falling, you know, in love and wanting to date, and then by the time they get home from that vacation, they're like, oh yeah, no, we broke up, which is exactly what happens in this movie. And I love that through the whole thing. They're really nice cutaways to laugh. They crack jokes. And they get put in situations that add extra fear. They're on the Ferris wheel during the fire elemental fight. And that's where, you know, Ned calls the stealth suit Spider-Man Night Monkey. which is what, everyone thinks is the Spider-Man knockoff in Europe now, which is great. But what I thought was so brilliant in adding that element to Ned's story and bringing in Betty is in the comics, Ned, like I said, wasn't friends with Pete per se. He worked at the Bugle and had a crush on Betty, who Pete dated. Then when he stopped to date Gwen, he started dating Betty, and then eventually they got married. When Pete finds out that they're getting married, it happens in a Mysterio issue. When Pete finds out that they're getting divorced, it happens in a Mysterio issue. So to have Ned and Betty start dating and stop dating in the Mysterio movie, I just thought was brilliant. And again, it's just the deep cut stuff. Oh, it's why I love Marvel so much. I thought it was such a nice element, but again, super funny to watch unfold on screen and just really, really enjoyable. And this movie had a ton of humor. The humor in this movie is fantastic. Right from the very beginning, man, where we get like Aunt May at the fundraiser joking about coming back in her house and someone else was now living there, and like the wife thought she was a mistress. Then we get like this opening tribute video from the high school where it's Betty Brant and Jason Iannello once again doing like the morning announcements. Shout out to Jorge Ledenborg Jr. Wish he would have been in the science class group because he's wonderful at the beginning of this, man. He has a moment where he's like, seriously, like, where are the Avengers? What are the plans? What do we got to do? And that's one of those questions that kind of lives through the whole movie for Pete. But the delivery from Jorge Ledenborg Jr., really, really funny. I enjoyed him. I wish we could have gotten more of him. But him and Betty are doing the morning announcements, and it opens with this Whitney Houston I Will Always Love You track playing underneath like a In Memoriam, and it starts obviously with a picture of Tony, and then it does all of the cheesy high school dissolves and functions. Like when you're a high school student and you're in like the video class, which I was in, there's something about when you start to learn stuff, you just want to put it on a display, and the effects, when you start to learn effects, man, it's like, oh man, look at this cool wipe, look at this cool wipe, and all of them are the different pictures. They use like a pixelated wipe, they use like all the different ones that you would use in high school. So perfectly high school. As there's so many things in this movie, but like it goes from Tony to Cap to Black Widow to Vision, and I like that the Vision picture, like all the pictures are crisp and clean, and the Vision picture is clearly something that was like he was in the background probably. I think it's from Civil War. Must have been like a background photo. They zoomed in real bad so it's blurry. I thought that was genius. And then of course it ends back on Tony, and you're just like, leave it to the Spider-Man movie to take something that was so emotionally crushing. When I watched it the first time, I like was starting to tear up just because I started thinking about Tony, which makes me cry all the time. And then I'm like, wait, am I supposed to laugh? Is this supposed to be funny? What's going on? And it would be the Spider-Man movie to kind of add some lightness to that situation to kind of help us start moving on from Endgame. And then just their whole morning announcements where they talk about how like everybody just blipped, and that's what they call it now, the blip. You get to see video of like the band practicing and then disappearing, and like people in the bleachers disappearing and then them reappearing in the middle of a basketball game. So I love that stuff. And then even the teacher, when he's sitting down with Pete, he's like, oh man, like my wife faked being blipped. Like he thought his wife got blipped so she could run off with another man. It's like we had an actual funeral because I really thought she was dead. The stuff that they give to Martin Starr as Mr. Harrington, it's just great. Like moments like that, how he like just is not very good at chaperoning, and like everywhere he's supposed to go, he either ruins it or like things get upgraded because Fury keeps hijacking their their vacation, or even Spider-Man hijacks it a little bit, trying to protect everybody. But I loved how Martin Starr was used along with JB Smoove. I wanted more JB Smoove, which is normal. But he's great because he's like, this is supposed to be a science vacation. Notice how nothing about this vacation is science oriented. It's all witches. But like seriously, everywhere they go, it's like not Orient, like Venice, Prague. Why are we going there for science vacation? It's so interesting. So like those guys are really funny. And even in that morning announcements at the end of it, I kind of skimmed over Betty literally going, like she's mad because they disappeared around midterms, and even though they came back, they made them retake the entire year. So she's like, I'm just so over this school year. Like, it's time to move on, everybody. Like, literally, she goes, it's time to move on to a new phase of life. And like, oh, because it's literally like a time to move on to the next phase. So I love that. The humor is just great. Like I said, the introduction of Brad Davis, who's played by Remy, wonderful, man. Like the fact that he has a thing for MJ, the relationship that him and Peter have, that becomes so confrontational, like when they're on their way to Prague, Pete gets like sent, you see Fury hijacks, and like SHIELD people are there to take them wherever they're going next, and he's like, you go in there to get his new suit. He's like, I can't be Spider-Man, everyone will figure it out. So that's how he gets the stealth suit. And Brad comes in thinking it's the bathroom. It's a bar that's closed, and he sees Pete with his pants down because the woman's like, get dressed now. And then he like takes a picture, which leads to that moment where I said Peter almost killed Brad, which was everything with Brad is hysterical in this movie. I really, really liked Remy a lot. But like he wants to get the photo deleted, so when he puts on E.D.I.T.H. and he's like, "Oh my gosh, wait, I can see the phones?" Like Brad Davis, she's like, "Is that a target?" He's like, and he sees that he's looking at MJ, like, yes, and it sets a drone strike. Like target means something totally different to adults than it does to a 16-year-old, and that leads to that really cool shot where he shoots out and knocks the drone off, and then eventually gets the photo deleted. So I loved all this stuff with Brad Davis. I thought that was really clever. And then I mentioned E.D.I.T.H. The one thing we haven't talked about is why E.D.I.T.H. is E.D.I.T.H. And this is one of these things where Tony Stark is literally everywhere in this movie. Like I said, there's imagery or graffiti art or stuff of him, murals everywhere they go in the movie. London, Prague, Italy, New York. Everywhere we go in this, Tony's there. And if you didn't feel like Tony was there enough, when he puts on E.D.I.T.H., she's like, yeah, E.D.I.T.H. stands for even dead, the hero. So Tony Stark, to the point where for a hot second I thought that maybe we were gonna see Tony back in some shape or form. Like, was the E.D.I.T.H. glasses gonna be the Tony Stark AI? And I'm glad that it's not, because there are a couple moments in the movie where you feel like Tony is so present in the movie without being there. Like, you almost were expecting him to pop up somewhere. I'm glad they held that. I think that we're still going to eventually see the AI Tony Stark happen, and it'll probably happen through Peter, which would be very, very good unless they hold it until Morgan becomes like the next Iron Man. But I think at some point, and I think it'll probably happen through Peter, we will see that AI. But much like Infinity War, we have to let this sink in. Like, we had Infinity War for a year before Endgame. We're a couple months removed from Endgame. We can't already be bringing Tony back. So I like that they didn't go there, but I like that his fingerprints and his presence are just everywhere in this movie, including E.D.I.T.H. being even dead, the hero. Just absolutely genius. Like, before I forget, let me mention that, like, while Spider-Man is saving the day, MJ and Ned and Betty are all in trouble. And you see that shot that we got in the trailers where Happy like lands the jet and is like, come with me, I work with Spider-Man. And Flash is there too. He's like, you work for Spider-Man? He's like, I work with Spider-Man. And then the plane, the jet explodes. And you get this fun little like run with this group of 5 where they they're getting chased by drones and they hightail it into like where the crown jewels are. Happy's like, there's a safe in there. So first they kind of all have to hide from like a drone, and then MJ smashes one, but she goes for like one of those like spiked mallets, and you're like, oh my gosh. And like as she picks it up, like it almost hits the ground, but she stops it. Nevertheless, Mysterio goes, oh, I see you. And as he comes around, Betty does the smart thing of pushing over something so that it crashes, and the drone, and you get to see MJ take it out. They all get into the safe where they pretty much hang out. And you get one of these things where it's like right up against it, and like the drones are about to break through, and that's when Pete gets all the drones turned off. But just before that happens, you get this wonderful little moment where like, MJ says something about like, oh man, we're all gonna die. And we're like, that's really not helpful. And she's like, I'm sorry, I have this thing. There's just compulsion to like tell the truth in situations where I shouldn't. It doesn't really matter what other people are gonna respond to it. Like, and then like Flash says something, and Betty like admits something like, I think super nerdy. The only other one that really mattered to me is everybody's going, and clearly something that was weighing on him, right? Like right as Spider-Man jumps off that jet to dive into the illusion, right as he's doing it, he's like, and Happy, when I get back, and he kind of lets go and does the flip, he's like, we have to talk about you in May. So clearly all that must be weighing on Happy, and they're in the safe room, like where all the crown jewels are, and you just hear Happy go, I'm in love with Spider-Man's aunt. And everyone's like, what? He's like, I thought we were sharing. So spot on, happy, like funny, just a wonderful cut sequence while Spider-Man is up in the tower doing some badass stuff, man. Like I said, the humor in the movie just so strong. But then, after Spider-Man then goes on to save the day, everybody comes home. And first things first, they land in Newark, New Jersey. I've been to that international airport so many times. So cool to see them land in Newark, New Jersey. When you're someone from New Jersey like myself, anytime that pops up in a movie, you're just like, oh, that's so awesome. That's not, then you kind of get to see like MJ and Pete like holding hands. And I'm just caught up in like, oh my gosh, they're right at Newark. And then they're like outside and you're like, I've seen all these places. And then they layer this little thing in, where like all the parents are picking up the kids, and we go over to Flash. Another shout out again to Tony Revolori, who I mentioned. Great with his humor and his love of Spider-Man, so comic accurate. Like no matter what, he always supports Spider-Man. I loved all of that stuff. And then you get, like I said, they layer in this one little thing when they get home. Everybody's parents are picking him up, and his driver is there. He's like, mother couldn't come, and driver just shakes his head, and you're like, oh my god, like you feel for Flash Thompson, and Tony Revolori just pulls that off in the very limited amount of screen time he has. So I really enjoyed him. And then really the only people we haven't talked about in this movie are Nick Fury and Maria Hill, who again, Kobe Smulders and Nick Fury, of course played by Samuel Jackson, so wonderful in the movie. And I love how they get like caught in the illusion, and how that builds. The fact that he keeps tricking Nick Fury makes everything that's happening in the movie buy in more. Like Nick and Maria being there, especially in the first act, is really something that helps you go, oh, maybe this is something different. And then when the illusions start happening, Nick Fury keeps getting tricked into it. I literally sat there and was like, it is kind of like, there are a couple moments where I was like, maybe Nick Fury is part of the illusion too, because he feels too spot on at moments, and other moments he felt kind of off. And we get to find out something about Nick Fury and Maria Hill, and why it felt that way, specifically late in the movie, and why he kept getting tricked and duped, because Nick Fury is always 5 steps ahead of everybody, so to be fooled by Mysterio so many times, it was odd. And then you get this post-credit. After all the credits are over, we see Nick and Maria, they're driving in the car, and then all of a sudden, Maria Hill starts to change, and then Fury starts to change, and sitting in the seats are Talos, played by Ben Mendelsohn. Oh my gosh, anytime we can bring Ben Mendelsohn in, please do. And then his wife, Soren. They show up, and they've been impersonating Maria and Nick Fury, and they have this stereo conversation where it's like, you're gonna have to tell Nick that you were fooled by all this. He's like, come on, man, I mean, the craftsmanship. He's like, did you see the cape? Did you see the the illusions? They were so real. How could I not be fooled by that? So it answers that question of like, why was Nick getting fooled by everything? Because it's not Nick, it's Talos. And then he calls, who, he's like, gave him the glasses a week ago, and like, this is what's going on, but like, everyone's asking where the Avengers are. I think it's time for you to come back. And we flash up to Nick Fury sitting on a beach, and there's a phone call between Happy and Nick Fury that takes place when they're flying to London. It's like a secret message to be like, hey, Mysterio's a bad guy, we're coming to help, like, just so you know. And there's this thing where Happy says, someone found like a surfboard for you, and like, they say like looks can be deceiving, and Fury even makes a joke like, why didn't you just wink at the camera? Because literally that is telegraphing this end credits scene, because Fury gets up, it looks like he's on a beach, and obviously looks can be deceiving. You think they're talking about Mysterio, but they're really talking about, I think, Talos and Soren being the Maria and Nick Fury we have in the movie. And then we find out that Nick Fury is up in space on a space station with all of the other Skrull, and he's like, it's time to get back to work. And the implications are just massive. I'm not going to do that here. We'll talk about the post-credits separately. But just such a cool scene, and answered a lot of the questions you had with Nick and Maria. Like, why were they off? Because they weren't Nick and Maria. And I think it's only for this movie. I'm pretty sure we had the actual Nick Fury and Maria Hill all the way through up until Endgame. I think the switch happened somewhere in, but we'll talk about that separately. The other end credit scene that I teased earlier that features Mysterio, and another reason why I don't think Mysterio is dead. At the end of the movie, Spider-Man shows up naturally late to go on a date with MJ, and he takes her web swinging, and it's awesome to watch them swing around. He actually kind of like almost lets go of her at one point and pulls her back in, and when we get to the post, it's them coming down. She's like, I'm never doing that again. which is so brilliant because in all these movies, even like whether it's Superman or these Spider-Man movies, they're always like, oh my gosh, that was awesome. I want to do that again. It's like, no, that's terrifying. Actually be swinging around at the behest of another person that you have no control over. Terrifying. So it made so much sense for MJ to be like, we're never doing that again. And then Pete's about to take off, and all of a sudden we hear like a news bulletin sound, and he's like perched on top of like a light, and he looks up, and it is a news thing coming up attached to the screen in front of MSG. And the guy is like, we've obtained footage about the death of Quentin Beck, Mysterio, and you see video footage, like found footage of Quentin saying that Spider-Man was responsible for everything, which is once again a wonderful deep cut comic reference to the first time Mysterio popped up. Mysterio framed Spider-Man by dressing like him and developing like suction cups and webbing that would be like his webbing to steal things and make him be the bad guy so he could show up and be the hero. When you get to the end of the movie, all of a sudden you put everything together and you go, oh my gosh, the first time Mysterio was in the comics, he faked like he was a hero to get to Spider-Man by framing him for a crime. And here we are, he frames Spider-Man for his death, and he uses audio of Spider-Man telling E.D.I.T.H to kill all the drones, or he said, like, execute them. Or he's like, execute all of them, like, execute them all, or something like that. And in the context of the video, it sounds like he's saying to execute Mysterio and, like, people. And then right before Beck dies, he goes into the camera. Peter Parker is Spider-Man. What? And like I said, ties back to, I thought Peter was practicing a speech. Makes so much sense the next Tony Stark would also get to the end of that movie and have the world find out that who he is. Only Peter doesn't announce it. Quentin Beck does. And now he's essentially on the run, right? Like it looks so convincing that he killed Quentin Beck that you're just like, holy cow. And now everybody knows who Peter is. Yet then you sit there and you think about what you just watched. And you go, what I referenced before, like Beck has faked his death many times. When did he have time to shoot that footage? Like, if he was shooting footage setting up Peter Parker to kill him after he got shot, well, then it was after all that stuff happened and he comes up with that spin, which means he's not dead. Or he planned that before Spider-Man showed up, did all of that stuff in pre-production, you could say, and thus meant he planned to die, which you'd have to mean you wouldn't actually plan to die. You'd fake your death, which means, ipso facto, he's not dead. I don't think Mysterio's dead, man, just because the fact that video exists. And it also answers a question. Right as Mysterio's dying, you see him hit something, and then you see Bill uploading stuff to a disc. Clearly he was sending all that footage to them so they could cut it and make that video. But I think Quentin's still alive. Now, the other thing about this scene is the Daily Bugle, which we haven't seen yet until right here in this moment in these Spider-Man movies. The person who delivers the news for the dailybugle.net is none other than J. Jonah Jameson. And the person playing J. Jonah is none other than J.K. Simmons. He's back, baby! Oh my gosh. My audience lost their mind. And I think it's such a brilliant way to bring him in. One, I don't think this connects to the original Spider-Man movies. Like, I think this is just a really nice fan service moment for Marvel being like, hey, we're going to hire the only person born to play J. Jonah in real life. We're going to bring J.K. back. I think that's just a fan service. I don't think it has anything to do with the other movies. But the way they're adapting it, like I said, it's so obvious that Marvel and Sony have their hands on the pulse of Spider-Man. The way that things from the comics to the cartoons to some of the other movies are all referenced in this. Having J. Jonah Jameson be a digital newspaper ripped right from the new Spider-Man game for PS4. In that world, he is, I think he's a podcaster. He has a Daily Bugle like podcast where he talks all the time, so you hear him throughout the game just pop up on the radio. But to have him attack from that element, and to have him supporting Mysterio as a hero and Spider-Man as a bad guy, also deep cut to those 1963 comics where he actually did do that. He supported him in that first issue in number 13 of The Amazing Spider-Man. He supported him as a hero, and that Spider-Man was the villain. So just a perfect mashup, and it sets J. Jonah into the perfect spot to be what J. Jonah is. So I just like from these are easily the two best post-credit scenes we've gotten in years, maybe ever, from Marvel. They're so meaty and they're so substance-filled in the fact that they're setting up stuff for Spider-Man and stuff for the MCU as a whole. This movie is so marvelous. I've talked about it for almost an hour. Holy crow, man. We had so much to unpack and just spoil and dive into, and we didn't even dive into all of it. But the Jake Gyllenhaal and Mysterio just felt so good to talk about that, get that out in the world. His performance is mind-blowing. This is, for me, the best Spider-Man movie. And I think now you know why, because as a Mysterio fan, executed perfectly, and Tom Holland, again, just raising his game, stepping it up, becoming the superhero. Now he's got to be the superhero that everybody knows, and like with a Batman twist, is also kind of the bad guy, at least to the public. Brilliant. I can't wait. I hope they do so many more than 3. Like, we're obviously going to get 3 Spider-Men, and I would love to see John Watts, Chris McKenna, and Eric Summers finish this 3-movie story and hopefully keep it, to this contained high school version of Spider-Man. I'd love to see them finish that, but then I hope Spidey is around for any Avenger team up, put him in other movies, have him 4 or 5 movies. I mean, we got to get to the Sinister Six. I'm telling you, Mysterio's not dead. There's so many things, and like I said, you got to just keep your ears and eyes open for anything that says Dr. Ludwig Reinhardt. If you see that, it's going to confirm that Quentin's coming back, and I hope we get more Jake Gyllenhaal. But tremendous movie start to finish. It was so fun to talk about pretty much everything in this movie. Now I want to know what you're thinking. If you have stuck around, if you jumped around to see the different things I was talking about, let me know everything you loved about Spider-Man Far From Home. What are your favorite moments? What are your favorite things about Mysterio? Did you love the reveal, how they held it, how the marketing kept it from us, so that it played the way it did in the movie? Have you gone back and rewatched it to pay real close attention to the illusions and see some of the things that confirm that they're illusions in the actual sequences? What were your favorite Spider-Man moments? What were your favorite humor moments? Did you somehow not like this movie? Now that you can talk it free, I want all the details. Everything you loved about this goes down below in the comments. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. I know it was a long one. I thank you for sticking around. If you listened the whole time, or even if you're jumping around, there will be chapter markers down below. I hope you've enjoyed all of this. For the Seaman's Cinema Sit-Down, a lengthy spoiler review on Spider-Man Far From Home, one of the best of all time. I'm Seaman, and I'm signing off. Peace! Well, you guys are still here. You must be looking for some more content. Well, don't worry, Seaman's got you covered, man. You got videos like this guy and this guy